Hey everybody. Hopefully you remember that in class today we worked on multiplying with a bunch of different kinds of numbers, and we also worked on identifying different properties of multiplication that were at work in certain problems, right? Here are some examples of the properties we looked at in class today, and we looked at the notes last night. If you have these in your notes from last night, you probably don't need to copy them down again unless you want to, just to make sure. But we're just going to review them really quickly because these properties are really the foundation of a lot of the work we're going to be doing this year. So the associative property tells us that it doesn't matter how we group the things that we're going to multiply. If we're going to multiply more than two things, we can group them however we want. We're going to get the same answer as long as it's only multiplication involved. The multiplicative property of 0, anything times 0 equals 0. The commutative property just tells us the order doesn't matter. The multiplicative property of -1 just tells us that anything times -1 will give us the opposite of that number. So -5 times -1 would give us the opposite of -5, which is +5. And then there's the identity property of multiplication. That's just 1 times any number will give us that number. Now we're going to use those to investigate some more complicated multiplication problems today that involve variables. Let's take a look at our first example. Here we want to find the product of -4x times 0.25. Now, in order to do problems like this, we're going to have to show a couple steps usually, and it's always a good idea to take them one step at a time and show our work as we go. Now, the associative property says that it doesn't matter how I group these factors. I really have three factors here. I have -4, I have x, and I have 0.25. Now the associative property says we can move the parentheses. It actually also means we can get rid of the parentheses entirely. So because I have only multiplication here, I have -4 times x times 0.25. The associative property lets me get rid of those parentheses. Now I'm going to use the commutative property, -4 times 0.25 times x at the end, right? The commutative property says the order doesn't matter. Now I can just do the order of operations. I could do my multiplication from left to right. That means I'm going to do -4 times 0.25. And when I'm calculating this, the commutative property, remember, lets me change the order. So I'm going to do -0.25 times 4. Because I know I have a negative times a positive, I know my answer is going to be negative. So when I'm writing this, though, I'm just going to write 0.25 times 4. Now 4 times 5 is 20. 2 times 4 is 8. We add the 2. That's 10. And here I have two decimal places in the two things I'm multiplying, just 1, 2. I don't have any here. So my answer should have two decimal places, and I get 1.00, or just 1, and since my answer is going to be negative, I have -1 times x, and the multiplicative property of -1 says that -1 times x gives me the opposite of x, which is just -x. So there's my answer. That's as simple as we can make this original product. Alright, let's try two more here, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. In my first problem, right now I already see some things that I can multiply even if we were just going left to right like the order of operations tells us to. For instance, I got -3.1 times -2.4. Now, I know a negative times a negative is going to give me a positive, but I still want to multiply 3.1 by 2.4. So 1 times 4 is going to give me 4. 3 times 4 is going to give me 12. Now I've put my 0 here for a placeholder. I got 2 times 1, that's going to give me 2. And I got 2 times 3 is going to give me 6. Now I can add these up. I got 4, 4, and 7. And because I have two decimal places in my factors, I'm going to have two decimal places in my product, 7.44. So now I'm going to rewrite this as 7.44 times negative 5 times negative x. So now I have 7.44. I'm going to multiply that by negative 5. I already know my product of these two numbers is going to be negative because I have different signs, positive times a negative. So 7.44 times 5. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 2, that's 22. Carry the 2 here. And 7 times 5 is going to be 35, plus 2 is 37. And I have 2 decimal places right here, none here. So I'm going to need 2 decimal places in my answer. So I'm going to write that as 37.2. We don't need the 0 on the end. And we said that was going to be negative, right? So negative 37.2 times negative x. Now, I'm looking at this here. I have a negative times a negative. I know my product is going to be positive, but I don't have anything to multiply by this. I don't have any more numbers. So I'm going to write my product as 37.2x. And there's my answer. And that's as simple as it's going to get. Looking to the right now, I now have a couple of fractions in there, and here I actually have 2 variables also. So let's do the same thing. Let's work our way left to right. Now there's a couple ways we could multiply these fractions. We can start by noticing we got a positive times a negative. We know our product's going to be negative, and I'm just going to multiply straight across. So I have negative 20 over 12 times 3 gives me 36 times that weird little cursive A times negative weird cursive A. Now I want to simplify here. Negative 20 over 36. I know 2 goes into both of those. Is there a bigger number? 4 goes into both of those. 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. 36 divided by 4 gives me 9. So I'm just taking it one step at a time. Now, I don't have any more numbers here. I think that's as far as that fraction is going to go. But I do have a times negative a. Now, this is a positive a times a negative a. So I know my answer is going to be negative. And hopefully remember your exponents. If I have something times itself, a times a, that's going to give me a to the second power. And now that I have a negative 5/9 times negative a squared, that's going to give me a positive 5/9 times a squared. And that is our final answer.